Thank you, Dr. Ludmilla. All four conversations really, really fascinating. And I really was interested in your talk and the information from the young people, because that, in a sense, that leads very nicely onto something in the UK, what we call a GILIC, the GILIC competence. And I'll just read what the GILIC competence is about. Just bear with me for a moment. Yes, so it's just a long history of, I think it was Veronica or Victoria Gillick, long story. But anyway, they ended up by saying this. And just to say that I was in Cardiff some time ago, and I was on the tour, the bus tour around the city, and traffic was brought to a standstill. And it was parents, hundreds and hundreds of parents, who were taken to the streets opposing their children being vaccinated. So the Gillick report says this: children under the age of 16 can consent to their own treatment if they are believed to have enough intelligence, competence, and understanding to fully appreciate what's involved in their treatment. This is known as Gillick competent. Otherwise, someone with parental responsibility can consent for them. So that's the situation that we have in the UK. And parents, as I said, in Cardiff, and I suspect in many other parts of the city, well, that was in Wales, but in the UK, have demonstrated vehemently about their children being forcibly vaccinated. Okay, I think there's another slide as well from Julia Morris. Can we just see that for a moment? Yes, this is Dr. Julia Morris, who not too long finished her PhD, I think to do with genetics. So this is a blog, vaccination hesitancy. And one of the things for me about hesitancy is you can say pause. Hesitancy can be seen very, very negatively. But what people are doing, they are pausing. And there's a blog that she's got, How to Do Your Research. So she's given you some guidelines, some structure, what you can do for yourself to get medical facts, the information to make a better informed decision whether you want to take it or not. Thank you very much indeed for that slide. Right, we're going to have a bit of a panel discussion now for about 10 minutes. I'd like to, and then we'll go on to some Q&A shortly, and I'll make sure that I manage the time as well. So I don't want to be saying one thing for one people and then I'm doing something different. That won't do. I'd like to ask maybe first to Dr. Michelle, but maybe others of the panelists can maybe support or maybe put their perspective. So, you know, we've listened to your talk. The question I had, what can Black people do being mindful of the, well, I guess it's been kind of answered, being mindful of the being mindful of COVID-19 if the vaccine allegedly is the only means of protection? So I use allegedly, inverted commas. You would have heard my speech. So what can Black people do?
Yes, thank you for that question. I mean, I think it's so nice to have so many different specialists from so many different backgrounds, because I thought that Dr. Johnson, Reverend Les, and Dr. Lumila, they really laid out this kind of issue of comorbidities, right? So one of the things, if you look at the statistics today, Black people are really vulnerable. And so one of the things to think about is, regardless of your particular, or there's a space in which, regardless of your particular feeling about COVID, it comes down to protecting yourself. And wouldn't it be a great kind of like stick it to white supremacy if you say, you know what, I'm going to persist, I'm going to live, and I'm going to protect myself in the way that I know how. And I think for me, you know, I got the vaccine, but there was a moment, especially because they kept changing the age limit in the UK about like when you would get certain ones. And so I was too old, and then I was too young. And then there were the things about blood clots. And I was like, oh, wait, let me see what happens with some other people. But in the end, you have to make a decision for yourself and a decision for your protection. And I also have to say, one of the things for me, being in the United States, I went back to see my parents because I hadn't seen them in 2.5 years. There was a an epidemic in the South of unvaccinated people in hospitals on breathing machines, and it was impacting children. And the governor of Mississippi had to get on the TV and say that you actually have to wait for a child to die for your child to get attention. And the thing is, we can sometimes focus on COVID and we forget about that whole issue of health, which is that if the NHS is too busy having people on breathing machines because of COVID, how do you get your cancer treatments? How do you get your other kinds of health interventions that you need to actually, you know, deal with all of those other things that were present before COVID? And so I think that we have to, you know, think about the vaccine, but we also have to think about our collective health and think about those exchanges that we may be asked to make.
Thank you, Dr. Michelle. And that leads really straight on to Dr. Ludmilla. You really made me think about healthcare and health, because I think what we do, we conflate the two.
Yes.
So I was wondering whether you could say a little bit more about what we can do as Black people in terms of our health.
So, and that's really what I'm most interested in. I even tell my students that. So I decided that I'm going to go back to the Garden of Eden. I'm going to my culture. I'm going to Suriname, where my grandmother used to give us cod liver oil. It was just the nastiest thing, but we had to take it. Then I gave it to my daughter and she said, "Mommy, you're cruel." But I told her, if you don't do it and you spit it out, I'm gonna give it to you again. So you swallow it. And we never had colds. So I own a tea business and I decided to do tea and wellness coaching. And I did it, what I did was actually in honor of my father who passed away in 2015. And so I wanted to make sure that I did something that will have his legacy live on, and also that of ours as immigrants to the United States. I said, there is no reason for us not to take things into our own hands, because we still have the Garden of Eden. It doesn't mean you have to go to Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, but I do recognize that not everybody has access to fresh produce. Mm-hmm. So I do want to say that I do recognize that for mm-hmm. those of us who do, there are some simple things that we can do to take care of our health. We can keep drinking a lot of water every day. We can continue, it's difficult. We can look at our diet, and I hate to use the word diet because it has the word die in it. We can look at our nutrition behavior. Our nutrition behavior must change, because if we look at the virus and how it behaves, it latches on to your saliva. For people who build up too much mucus, there is no way for them to bring it up. I have talked to so many people about eating sea moss, Caribbean people, and I have found yet one person who says to me, I'm going to do it. Everybody's talking about how nasty it is. But guess what? I take that every day because I don't care how nasty it is. It's not nastier than ending up in that hospital across the street. All right. So we have to make up in our minds that our health is our responsibility. But if we continue to look at the government to fix our health, when history shows us that it's not their priority, we're not going to get anywhere. So we must come together and say, this is what I'm going to do. I drink hibiscus tea every day. I eat sea moss every day. And I just do certain things, not because I like them. Of course, the hibiscus tea I like, but the sea moss, everybody knows it doesn't taste good. But do some things with it. Put it in your food. And then the other thing, full disclaimer, as of last week, my husband and I decided to become vegan. I'm not saying that vegan is going to protect you from the virus, but what I wanted to do was to address his high blood pressure, my history of seizures, my father's arthritis, my spinal fusion with possible osteoporosis, and all these things that have no answers when I took the vaccine. What I want to do is to make sure that I don't exacerbate certain things that make me more vulnerable to becoming immunocompromised. Okay. And so my food was the best thing for me to start, to make sure that I put into my system what I can control, not what the government has for me. Reading labels, understanding what you're eating, those things are very, very important. I'm not saying that everybody needs to become vegan, absolutely not. I'm sharing that's my decision I made. And I made that decision with a husband who was born and raised in Baltimore, eating porks and all the other things. And so were we. Okay. Pig's feet, all that stuff, chitlins and all this other stuff. But I believe that if we constantly look at the negative of things, then we will never look at how easy it is actually for all of us to come together and find common solutions that meet our common needs, instead of waiting for others to find the needs. Because, by the way, those people who are looking for the solutions, they've never stepped in our shoes. They have never lived in our communities.
Sure.
You know, I remember during Hurricane Katrina, not to belabor, but during Hurricane Katrina, I want to bring up this point. During Hurricane Katrina, if some of you remember, it was an awful flooding in New Orleans. And I was on the Hill and I was telling Congressman Conyers, who's from Detroit, I said, you know, we got to do something for the people that's different than just legislation. And he asked me why. I said, this is why. Everybody is saying, let's take the people and we move them to Houston, we move them to all these other places and displace them. Displacing people is a mental health issue, because now you've taken them away from their roots. But what the legislators were saying, well, you know, they should be happy because at least they're in better housing. Well, you know, that shack that my mama may have lived in, that was our shack. We owned it. It might have been a shack to you, but it was our house. So instead of displacing me to Houston, where I don't know what to do, show me what I can do in my community. Put some things in there so that I have the same access to the fresh produce that you all have. Okay. And those are the things that we've got to also advocate for, not just about the virus. We got to look at these other things that are exacerbating our whole well-being. It's more than just the virus. It really is. It's more than vaccine. I'm sorry. It's more than just the vaccine.
Thank you, Dr. Ludmilla. I'd just like to say.
I totally agree with what Ludmilla has said, but also exercise. I mean, going back to nutrition, I mean, I'm vegetarian, my children are vegan. We haven't eaten meat for 20 odd years. And the benefits of that, but exercise, and it's something we need to do. We need to take back our own health and stop depending on the health service. Mental health, coping mechanism. When you exercise, you release endorphins, feel-good factor. So it's getting that, building up our muscles as well. I encourage young people to go for a walk. I go for a walk. I do various exercise because it builds up that endorphin, the feel-good factor. But diet is so important, as well as sleep. Sleep is paramount because it heals the body and it heals the mind. You're able to concentrate, you're able to move forward. So drinking water, that is so important. And I encourage everyone to drink 1.5 litre per day. Take it in sips, because I do that. It's very healthy, hydrates the skin, keeps you youthful. But it's, if you've got underlying health condition and you're taking medication, the side effects, if you drink water, you're flushing that out. You know, and it's things like that. But we need to take back our own health. I mean, my parents are Jamaican. They came from the Caribbean, and my mum always used pulses, kidney beans, red beans, vegetables mixed with that, healthy. So it's going back. We're aware that meat has been injected with steroids. You buy a chicken and you see it, it looks plump. I mean, I've bought that for years, but it's injected with steroids. We know that quite a lot of meats are genetically modified. That's going to have an impact on your health. So it's going back to basics.